Thank you for listening to Scandinavian Crimes Podcast. Be sure to check out the episode links and be part of our other social media platforms where you can leave a topic suggestion or even share some of your insights regarding the subject matter of the episode. We will always do our best to provide a well-researched episode, but sometimes due to limited access to information and translation issues, some information can be lost. It is therefore good to do your own research and get a deeper understanding of a case of your own interest. So with that all said, let us start today's episode.
Welcome to Scandinavian Crimes. My name is Devante, and say hello to my lovely, gorgeous co-host, Delila.
Hi, everyone.
And on this podcast, we will cover famous Scandinavian criminals who made their mark throughout Scandinavian history. So I want to start off the episode by saying Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
For today's story, we are going to cover a story that seems borderline supernatural. In this story, 14 seem to have been attacked by a tall, mysterious figure that could not be described by the lone survivor of this said attack. What makes this more terrifying is despite the extensive investigations, the perpetrator was never identified. Various theories of the killer's identity have been presented over the years, but none seem to have panned out. So today, this is a story of the unsolved murders of Lake Bodom. It was supposed to be a pleasant lakeside camping trip. 4 teenagers set out on their sweetheart's getaway with the intent of roughing it in a single tent perched on the banks of the serene lake. But by the next morning, 3 would be dead and the 4th brutally injured and the prime suspect in what became known as the Lake Bodom murders, Finland's most famous unsolved murder. On July 4th, 1960, 15-year-olds Mila
Irmeli Björklund and Anja Mäki
set out for a camping trip. Accompanying the 2 young women were their 18-year-old boyfriends,
Seppo Anterio Boisman and Nils Wilhelm Gustafsson.
They had chosen a well-known campsite on the shores of
Bodom,
known in English as Lake Bodom. The arrival of the campsite and subsequent afternoon went smoothly after the teenagers enjoyed their time in nature. It wasn't until the early hours of the next morning that disaster struck. Sometime between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. on the morning of June 5th,
Björklund, Mäki, and Boisman
were stabbed and bludgeoned to death through their tent. An attempted attack on Gustafsson left him with a concussion, a fractured jaw, and several broken facial bones. Nils Gustafsson, the sole survivor of the incident, would tell the tale hundreds of times over the next year, his story getting spun wildly out of control several times, over and over. But the facts remained the same. Gustafsson stated afterward that he had seen a glimpse of the attacker clothed in black with bright red eyes coming for them. The horrific scene was first stumbled upon by a group of birdwatching boys around 6 a.m. who noticed the slain teenagers' collapsed tent on the lakeshore. They also reported seeing a blond man walking away from it.
Mäki and Boisman's
bodies were found inside the tent, but
Björklund,
Gustafsson's girlfriend, was found on top of the tent, naked from the waist down and lying next to Gustafsson.
Björklund
also was in the worst state of the victims and had clearly been stabbed even after her death. It wasn't until 11 a.m. that the bodies would be discovered by the carpenter named Riso Siren. Immediately, Siren alerted the police, who arrived on the scene around noon. By then, the victims of the Lake Bodom murders had been dead for almost 6 hours. From the start, the crime scene was a confusing one. Rather than enter the tent and stab the teenagers from the inside, it appeared that the assailant had attacked blindly from the outside of the tent. He or she clearly used a knife to stab the victims, but their bodies showed evidence of another weapon, an unidentified blunt object. Furthermore, several strange items were missing from the scene, adding another layer of mystery to the crime. For example, the keys to the teenagers' motorcycles were gone, but the motorcycles themselves hadn't been taken. Gustafsson's shoes were also missing, though were later found roughly half a mile from the tent along with parts of his clothing. Later, the papers would lambast the police for the shoddy handling of the case from this point forward. The police reportedly failed to take official recordings and findings and did not secure the area, leaving it open to contamination. Shortly after the police left, curious onlookers and careless campers all but destroyed the murder scene. In an attempt to rectify their mistake, the police enlisted the help of the soldiers to search for the missing items. The site was instead further trampled, and most of the items were never found.
Gullströms kiosk
near Lake Bodom was frequented by the campers. However, he was known for being hostile towards them, and witnesses claimed to have seen him cut down tents and throw rocks at hikers over the years. Some even said that they saw him leave the murder scene, but then they claimed to have been too afraid of him to alert the authorities.
Gullström
allegedly made several confessions in which he displayed knowledge of the crime both drunkenly and sober, though they were all ignored by police. 9 years after the Lake Bodom murders,
Gullström
drowned in Lake Bodom, likely by suicide, rendering DNA evidence as requested by several authorities over the years impossible to gather. The second suspect remained of interest until 2004. His name was Hans Assmann and has been rumored to be a former KGB spy living near the shores of Lake Bodom. Over the years, Assmann earned the reputation of somewhat of a recluse, combined with the KGB rumors, consequently resulting in him being suspected in several murders, though none of the accusations actually stuck. But Hans Assmann had gone into Helsinki Surgical Hospital the day after the attack with fingernails black with dirt and his clothes covered in what appeared to be red stains. Hospital staff reported that Assmann was nervous and aggressive, but other than a brief questioning, the police did not pursue Assmann any further, as they claimed that he had a solid alibi in regards to the Lake Bodom murders. Assmann's stained clothes was never investigated despite doctors insisting that it was blood. Assmann also matched the description of the blonde man fleeing the scene and cutting his hair shortly following the newspaper article detailing the case after it came out. Finally, police made an arrest 44 years after the murders. In March 2004, Niels Gustafsson, the sole survivor of the Lake Bodom murders, was arrested and brought to trial. Police claim to have suspected Gustafsson all along and insisted that there was evidence to support their claims. For one, police claim that Gustafsson's shoes had been worn by the killer during the attack, evidenced by the fact that they were covered in the victim's blood, but not Gustafsson's. During the trial, the prosecution spun a story involving a fight between Gustafsson and Bosman, which culminated in a triple homicide. The prosecution claimed Gustafsson had gotten drunk and thus exiled from the tent. When Bosman made an attempt to talk to him, a fight ensued that Bosman allegedly won, resulting in Gustafsson's fractured jaw and broken facial bones. Angry at the fight, Gustafsson must have gone back to the tent and in a blind rage killed his girlfriend and 2 friends. Then he inflicted the rest of the superficial stab wounds on himself, tried to hide his shoes, and staged the rest of the crime scene. The fact that the young birdwatchers who originally found the site claimed to have seen a man leaving the area backed up the prosecution's claims. Gustafsson's defense, however, dismissed this story, claiming that if Bosman and Gustafsson truly had gotten into a fight, Gustafsson would have been too injured to viciously murder his friends, let alone walk more than half a mile round trip to hide his shoes. Ultimately, the defense won, and the year after he was arrested, Gustafsson was acquitted of all charges. To this day, however, the suspicion remains. No further suspects have been named, no further evidence has been found, and the Lake Bodom murders still remain Finland's most horrifying and longest unsolved crime to this day. And that is the story of the Lake Bodom murders.
This was very interesting. And the fact that also there were some suspects, and also the case regarding that the police didn't really take care of the place appropriately and doing their job right. So there's a lot of like ifs and buts, but I think my theory is initially I thought that it would have been Gustafsson.
Well, why did you initially think it was Gustafsson? Let's run down this trail because we're going to try all the options we can before we get to the conclusion of what we think it really is. But why did you first think it was Gustafsson?
The reason I thought it was Gustafsson in the beginning was that because of how Björklund was treated and found, it seemed so personal. It seemed like, why was it just Björklund, which was his girlfriend, the one who was humiliated for, first of all, being naked on top of the tent, but also having this stabs and also stab after death as well. I thought that because of those two things, I think that it would have been him. However, him taking, like, walking miles and stabbing himself and like all those things seems a bit questionable to do just to cover up something that he have done. But it could also be what basically what the trial was about, that they had a fight. It could be some kind of drama that they had between themselves, and something that triggered this killing spree. But it also seemed far-fetched that why he would go and like almost bleeding out, maybe walking around, and it's very like a lot of things that could be like, it could have been him, but also it could not have been him at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because it's like this particular story, the thing that makes this difficult to try and figure out who did what is because I feel like there's still a ton of information that we're missing. And I'm sure there's still plenty of stuff that they didn't make public, for whatever reason, or just, over time, information.
But also
gone.
The police didn't do a good job in like protecting the evidence, so everything is just like speculations. So.
Yeah, that crime scene was absolutely not handled properly. Like for people who are like listening to the podcast, like usually I'm pretty sure you've seen like Law and Order and like, CSI and even Criminal Minds. Like when you go to a crime scene as a police officer, as a detective, you have to secure the crime scene. You have to block it off. You have to make sure that, you're not introducing new pieces of information that have nothing to do with the crime. So the fact that the scene got trampled on, they introduced new footsteps, probably people probably encamped over there or heard about the murders and went looking for themselves. They did not secure the chain of custody, from my understanding as well. So evidence was not well kept, what little evidence they had, and then it was just too much going on. And from day one, I feel like the case was bound to fail, and whoever did it definitely had an easier time kind of going along with this because of the fact that the police did absolutely nothing, and they fell short in that regard for sure. So I think they did those girls a disjustice. I said disjustice, an injustice. And then I think they did the other kid as well an injustice. We don't know if it was Gustafsson, but we're assuming he's innocent because that is true. He wouldn't stab himself, walk half a mile and then walk half a mile back, and it would seem like too much to do all that and then still risk himself bleeding out, because they didn't even get help towards him until like around noon, 1 o'clock, something like that. So
I mean, it could
was
also
6
be
hours.
planned. Like, we can't say for sure that it was planned or not, because we don't really know if it was someone who initiated this trip, or if it was all of them, or if it was Gustafsson who initiated it. So like, it could also, he could be part of it, but as I said, it seems very unreasonable to just stab yourself in order to cover your tracks. Or maybe it was a spontaneous thing that he was mad and just killed them, and then was like, oh, I need to hide my tracks, and then this was his attempt to do so. But it still seems a little bit off to do that.
Yeah, mostly because even in the heat of the moment, like, the killing can happen for sure, but the fact that he would think, which it wasn't a terrible plan at all. Like, if he was in the heat of the moment, killed them, and then he was like, well, let me hide my shoe half a mile away, stab myself, and that's really thought out in terms of in depth for someone who did something in the heat of the moment emotionally. But like I said, the defense came with a good point that if they got into an altercation or something like that with a broken jaw, which he did have, it would be very difficult for him to go through with these plans with the level of injuries he had. But I don't know, it's hard to say. I kind of want to agree on that one.
There's also another thing with him, like, telling this story over and over again, and like it sounds like some kind of bragging thing, but maybe it was just the way I understood it. But he was basically like talking about this story and saying he had red eyes, and he was tall, and like the murderer, the one who was doing this, and made it seem like it was some kind of supernatural thing, which also made me be like, this is a bit suspicious to go around and talk like this is a supernatural thing. I don't know, it's just very suspicious to me. That's why I was also like, I think it might be him, and he's trying to cover his like tracks by somehow use supernatural themes to make it less his fault, if you understand what I mean.
Do you not believe in the supernatural? Is that what you're saying? You don't believe?
I do believe in supernatural, but we have to be reasonable. We have to be. Sorry, yeah.
I mean, the supernatural is not reasonable. It's unexplainable. You know, what if, like, let's really suspend belief, right? What if he really did see a creature and the glowing red eyes, and then the fact that they can't find, well, like I said, the crime scene was severely polluted, but what if he really did see something supernatural that night? And, you know, it's just like, what if it was one of those mysteries, almost like the Loch Ness Monster situation, where you never really know, because one, we weren't there, two, unfortunately, smartphones didn't exist at the moment, so, you know, he didn't have the benefit of recording it on his iPhone or his Samsung. But what if he really did? Like how would that change? I'm not like, that's not like a real question, but it's like interesting food for thought.
Even if he saw something, if we say he saw something, there was still evidence of like him. There were other not victims. There were other observers, I guess, who saw another person at the place, and also the blood that was on his shoes and his clothes was also everyone's blood except for his. So there were like certain things that made me like, or he could have been what's it called, obsessed? No. What's the name of when someone is when a ghost take over your body?
Possessed, thank you.
Or he was possessed by an entity, and when he saw someone with red eyes, it was the demon, like, just going inside and taking over and just going ham. And then he wakes up, everyone is dead. I mean, like, that could be explainable. Don't you get like supernatural power and can basically walk around with injuries and stuff, and then he just wakes up and, like, I mean, that could be explainable. Like, I think that's not entirely impossible.
Because I think, didn't they have, like, there was a supernatural case, because you know the movie, well, you already know the movie The Conjuring, but you know they had that supernatural case where someone, even though I think it's like not until 15 years later, that was the first time someone had used like possession in a courthouse as like an excuse for killing somebody, because they had no history of any mental health or any issues before, but literally that happened. They served their time and then they left and pretty much lived the rest of their lives and never had an issue ever again. But I don't know who, like, possession, that's interesting. I didn't think of it. I really thought like maybe it could have been like a monster, not like a monster, but being like a demon or something like that, something supernatural, because I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. I don't think anything is necessarily impossible. We just don't know it yet, you know. But I think if we want to get into the real thing, what I think it is, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me on this one, is that I think it was the KGB spy. And
yeah, of course, like that was, yeah. That after I was thinking about it, I was like, I think it's the spy. Honestly, it's the only logical
yeah,
explanation.
he probably killed them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably saw something they weren't supposed to see. They were out there camping, being all cute, like, oh my god, babe, give me a kiss, babe, let's cuddle, baby, oh my god, like love, hugs, kisses, oh my god. And the next thing you know, they were out there having a good time in the tent, and they saw something, or the KGB spy guy thought they saw something, and he was like, well, you're out there and I just did something illegal. I think you guys need to be promoted to afterlife. So basically killed them. And I think the monster with the glowing red eyes could have been him, because if he's KGB, he probably has access to like, military grade equipment in terms of not just guns, but even like masks and stuff and goggles, which if you see like you're wearing red goggles or it reflects light a certain kind of way, it can appear red if light hits it a certain kind of way. Even at night, obviously we know there's moonlight, and maybe they had a fire out there on lantern, but the light could have reflected light in a certain kind of way. In the goggles, if he was wearing a mask, and then he could have, basically killed them, and maybe he left the one alive to frame him. I don't know. Or maybe he just got sloppy. Who's to say? But
I think that this was I think he planted everything. I think because spies are usually very intelligent, and they know how a crime scene should look like. They know, like, they do know how it's gonna, like, what they have to do in order for it to look in a certain way. So that's why I thought, like, initially I was thinking Gustafsson, and then I thought about it and be like, but wait a minute, what if the spy planted evidence, so the shoes miles away thing kept Gustafsson alive, because he knows how to kill people. Like, spies knows how to kill people. How could he miss stab and miss like important like points on your body, and how could he miss that? So that's why I was like, I think he wanted him, if it wasn't going to survive, he still could be framed for the crimes.
Yeah.
So I think that the spy basically knew how to do everything well. And also what was interesting with him, Hans, that is that he, the day after, went to the hospital to have like an alibi, and he also cut his hair because he was blonde. So he cut his hair to look different. But what was weird was that his hands were like, he was full of blood, or like he had blood on his clothes and his hands, and he was a little bit aggravated. So that was a giveaway, but the police still didn't care about that. So I also think that the police might have something to do with the spy, and that they somehow have some kind of, not agreement per se, but that he has some kind of power, the spy that is.
What if he worked for the police?
Or works for the police, or the opposite. Yeah. Like, it could be either way around, basically. So that's why I thought, like, that could have been a logical explanation. The kids might have seen something, and he was afraid that he saw something. He killed them because he didn't want them to see. And he basically plants evidence, know how to, have an alibi, and the police also said he had an alibi. This, like, I see that this could be the most reasonable one. And also that the birdmen saw that it was a blonde guy walking around. He could have, like, maybe he had a mask when he was attacking the teenagers, and Gustafsson he only saw red eyes, right? He didn't say anything other than that. So that might have been him, the spy that is, masking or somehow not being identifiable, I guess. And like, there's things you can do. And then he took off his mask, and the birdman was like, oh, we see a guy walking away from there. But we can't really say if it was the spy or if the other one had blonde hair, because we don't really know the hair color of anyone than the spy.
Right.
So this is only speculations most of the time, but like I think that this is the most reasonable speculation or theory that we have, I guess.
I mean, that's true, but at the end of the day, it's so hard to tell like what it is. You know, lack of information. Like you said, the hair color thing, like it could have been Gustafsson because maybe he had blonde hair, but they never specified that he did or did not have blonde hair. The only evidence they seemed to had to support, the prosecution had to support their argument, was the fact that the shoes were covered in everybody else's blood but his, which, you know, there can be a valid excuse for that because it depends on where he got stabbed. If he got stabbed, like, let's say in his, like, not like his back, like his spine, but let's say somewhere towards his back, he wouldn't necessarily bleed, you know, be leaking on his shoes, you know, because the positioning of the knife wound, he probably would bleed onto his clothes for sure, but, you know, it might not ever make it to his sneakers, depending on, you know, how many layers he's wearing, how cold it is, how your blood is coagulating. Like, there's a lot of factors in that as well, so it's hard to say that. But I think I definitely do think it was probably the KGB spy, because the fact that his name even popped up, he was a recluse, and if you know anything about the KGB, you know, like, they don't play no games when it comes to, there could be no witnesses. And like you said, they definitely know how to stage a crime, because it was very, like, first of all, he was already this girl's boyfriend. So, like, I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all. I'm not saying that. But in this case, I feel like it's less likely he would have had to have raped her when they went out there to be couples. So, you know, I don't really, I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying I know what's going on, but I just think it's a little less likely.
Theories. These are all theories, so we don't really know for sure.
I'm just like theorizing that maybe it was a little less likely he would have to, you know, sexually assault her, and maybe the serial killer, but basically the murderer, though, the KGB agent, he would have to stage the crime to look like it was sexual assault, knowing that the police wouldn't look much further, because, you know, anything sexual assault related. He succeeded,
basically, if we think about it, if it was him, because after 44 years, but still they already like suspected and kept suspecting Gustafsson this whole time. But let's not forget about,
they never even questioned him either.
No, yeah. But let's not forget about Gyllenström. I think that was his name. He also did confess a lot, sober and drunk, but he did confess, and he was also showing aggression towards other
the other campers, right? People who were in the area. Yeah. So
we can't forget about him also existing. However, the reason I didn't suspect him was because, first of all, he kind of like confessed to the police, but was in a state of like being drunk and also sober, and he could also have not been fully like sober all the time, or during the incident maybe not be sober. So he could be wrong in, like, maybe he thought it was him, but it could have been that he saw someone else do it and then assumed it was him, or maybe, like, you know, maybe he had blackouts and just assumed, or maybe he saw some flash, like maybe he saw something but just assumed it was him. Like, we can't really know for sure, but I think that the police should still have reported it and, you know, not just discarded. That's why I also think it's the spy, because the police kept discarding and not taking care of the evidence properly. Like, they were not like very lenient towards that. That's why I'm going towards the spy theory. Yeah. Because
that's the one that seems most feasible, and they ignored everything else. They ignore the KGB spy. They ignored Gyllenström. They pretty much ignored everything, but then kept suspecting Gustafsson
this whole time.
Actually, on paper, had less of a motive, was less likely, because the amount of damage he sustained would make it difficult for him to do anything in the middle of like I said, trekking back and forth 1/2 mile round trip, which, you know, a total round trip mean he would have to walk a mile in total like that. So he was far less likely compared to the other 2 people who one confessed and one was already rumored to be like this spy kind of killer. So,
but also maybe all because Gyllenstrom was working in the kiosk of the store place, right? And he could have seen things, and he could have also known that the spy was there, being active and doing things, but he just tried to not. Like maybe he was being aggressive to the campers because he didn't want them to suffer or maybe die because of the spy. Like there are a lot of things that I think it's an interesting case because we can speculate everything and like try to use the little information that we have to like come up with theories. But
we would never really know.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's what makes this fun.
There's still also the possibility of, you know, it being supernatural. It could be a demon goat walking around in the woods and just like...
Demon goat. I'm so dead.
I don't freaking know. It's like, I don't know. Maybe they have like a cross thing and then goes upside down and like everyone's just dying and stuff.
I'm so dead. Y'all let us know what y'all think is going on with this particular story, because till this day it is still unsolved. There has been no more evidence, no more revelations, and Gustafsson, the only sole survivor, is, I'm assuming, if he was born, well, he was already like 18 actually, 1960, so he should be like in his 70s, maybe like late 60s, 70s, around there, give or take. So if he's still alive out there, you know, he's the only one who would really know what happened. But y'all let us know in the comments what y'all think would happen. And you know, just you can also hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We have all social medias. You should be able to find it on the episode, but you can just search up on TikTok Scandinavian Crimes, or Facebook Official Scandinavian Crimes, and Instagram Scandinavian Crimes. Anything Scandinavian Crimes, you'll recognize the logo. But let us know your theories and your thoughts across the social media platforms, as well as recommend other crimes and cases and stuff like that. And I hope you enjoyed today's Halloween episode. Very interesting, very up in the air, and potentially can still be supernatural. Ooh. But I hope you have a good Halloween, and, you know, take care of your teeth, and don't eat too much candy now.
Brush them teeth.
And exactly. And we will see you in the next episode.
Happy Halloween. Bye. 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 Bye.